Today, we're going to do an in-depth game review of the Blitz game I had in Washington Square Park against the youngest Nigerian national chess champion. They say don't review Blitz games, but when they're this accurate, is it really a Blitz game? So, the reason I'm doing this is I was pumped for that video. By the way, link in description below of just the raw footage of the Blitz game. I thought it was very cool. But then one of my students, he was like, Bob, it's not actually my name. My parents would never. If your name is Bob, I'm not sorry, but I'm sorry if that makes sense. He was like, you realize 99% of us don't understand what's going on. So I was like, fair statement. So today we're going to delve into like my thoughts throughout the game, the lines I was calculating, and just the game itself. So I'm looking forward to this. By the way, my opponent's name was Chi-Chi. That's powerful. That's a cool name. So we get a Sicilian. We get a closed Sicilian. Less theory. Grand Prix, I like. Okay, so A6. What A6 does, this is called the O'Kelly Sicilian. By the way, this is going to be like super in-depth, so if you have the brain capacity of a goldfish, may as well click off now. But A6, what it does is it stops bishop to B5. And in the Grand Prix, you want to trade that bishop off for the knight, hopefully double up their pawns, but really just get rid of the queenside knight, which would then allow us to shift our queen towards the king side in the middle game. So some of my students are like, what do we do when this pawn is on A6? And I tell them, well, you fianchetto it. And then it's just more like a normal closed Sicilian, less aggressive, unless you want to play G4, but let's not even get into that. So knight to F3, getting both knights out. Okay, and B5. So you do not want to face B5 with A4, because then they extend with B4, and they kick you out. Either you go to D5, and then they kick you out again, and they're just gaining space. They're gaining, space to develop. So though A4 is a middle game idea, you need to be like, I want to be prepared against B4, and that's why I like going Queen E2 here. Reason being, if they go B4, I like tucking my knight to D1, because then either I can go F2 or E3. If I go F2, I guard E4, I guard G4, and I like playing G4. If I go E3, you'll see what happens in the game. So bishop to B7, fianchettoing, and I also like my queen on E2, because now if they go B4, kicking my knight, I don't lose this E-pawn. So queen on E2. Plus, I'm not blocking in my light squared bishop, because I plan on fianchettoing it. So though my position looks awkward, it makes sense if you're familiar with the ideas. So all these moves are just development moves. I finally get fianchettoed. Okay, and H5. This is one of those moves where if you respond to it, it's not good. Like, for example, let's say you go H4. Push a flank pawn with another flank pawn. The reason that is a horrible move is because they get this outpost, right? We get this cup of pawns, and they get this outpost on G4 for the rest of the game. I would not want that. So I castle, and now, I mean, they can't go H4. If they go H4, I would just take that with my knight. There's no rook sacks. Don't see any ghosts. If there's no mate, there's no mate. They might go bishop E7. So, like, let's say they play bishop E7. There's many things to do. I would have played pawn to H3. And you see, now if they go pawn H4, you could just push pawn G4. And this is one of my favorite positions in chess. Sometimes you break with E5, sometimes F5, sometimes G5. Sometimes all the above, if you're really feeling it. So H5, don't respond to that. We get castled. He goes knight to F6, developing. Makes sense. And pawn to B3. So this is a move I used to not play in the Grand Prix. But after reviewing a bunch of games, I figured out B3 was very good. What's odd about B3 is it's much less to do with fianchettoing the bishop. Sometimes you go A3, obviously not here when they have a B pawn. But it gives routes to the bishop, gives potential to it. But the actual root of it is to stop C4. So it works very, very well when they have these doubled C pawns. And they try to get their bishop on B7 into the game, and then you absolutely freeze their C pawns. So that's kind of the point of B3, D3. Makes them harder to challenge on C4. Here they don't have doubled pawns though, and I do like my bishop on B2, so I put my bishop on B2. Okay, queen C7, he's playing well. He's like, okay, you don't know which side of the board I'm going to castle, you don't know where to attack. But I'm like, well, A4 is a move I've been wanting to play, and now I am ready for the extension. By the way, them taking makes no sense. You would just take with the knight. Don't take with the rook because they have knight B6. Take with the knight, open up your bishop. This is a good position for white. So he pushes. Now knight to d1, as expected. We get pawn d5. Okay. So here I played pawn to e5. I didn't like the looks of taking, but look at these crazy lines. This is why we review games. So if e takes d5, let's get into it. Okay, so knight takes d5 and pawn f5. This makes sense. You blast open the e file when their king is stuck in the center. They can't really take this pawn because knight to h4, they're all pinned. Your position is excellent here. So they can't take, and then you're going to probably give them a backwards pawn on e6 after you take when they don't take. And life will be good. But look at this line. Oh, and if bishop takes, you just gain a tempo. So there's that. But if pawn takes, this is the craziness. So rook to e1. Okay, that makes sense. Castle. Queen takes bishop, and your queen gets trapped. So I didn't even look at this throughout the game. Had I seen, pawn takes pawn and doubling up, I would have looked at this. But very hard. You need to find bishop takes f6. And they can't take with the knight because you win the queen. So they take your queen, you take, and you're just up material. So, yeah, that was too fancy for me in a blitz game. So I just pushed. Yes. Knight to g4, kicking out the knight, lands on g4, kicking out the knight, lands on h6. So I know he wants to go knight f5. I go knight e3. Now he cannot go knight f5 because I would just take that. And then what's the move here? You got to start thinking like this in your games. Pawn to e6, a clear and sacrifice. I mean, here it's not even a sacrifice. It's just a good move. But it's kind of like a clear and sacrifice. Their king's paralyzed in the center of the board. So strike in the center of the board. So we get pawn to d4. I was very happy to see this move. The game is still balanced, but I really love this position for white. It just makes sense to me. So you get this inverse cup of pawns, right? We talked about this cup of pawns. We could say this is an inverse. Is that weird? It looks like a cup to me. But it gives you an outpost on c4, so of course I'm going to claim the outpost. Now, it allows him to bring his knight to f5 now. So it closes out my dark squared bishop, opens up his light squared bishop, gives me a beast of a knight, gives him a pretty good knight. All in all, though, I'm happy. I really don't care about having bad bishops because I know one day they're going to be good. Okay, here, how do we deal with this? They are threatening knight to g3. That is a fork. And why would king h2 be a mistake? Okay, apparently it's not a mistake, but it's a mistake. Pawn h4. The reason is if you go pawn g4, they have knight to g3. And apparently this is slightly balanced even though they pick up an exchange. That's how good my position is. Nah, I'm not buying what the computer's saying there, but I don't want to lose an exchange. That's why queen to f2. Now when he goes pawn h4, now you go g4. Knight g3 is not a fork, so you save everything. This knight looks really good, but what is it really doing? Not much. It's controlling e4. That's about it. And luckily this knight on c4 controlled e3. It would have been way more annoying had his knight come to e3, but it couldn't. Okay, castle's queenside, and now knight to d2. I was very happy with this move. I'm trying to get the knights over to d6, trying to coordinate them. We get pawn g5. This move was not on my radar, and I was looking at a bunch of stuff for a while here. So I really wanted to go knight e4, but then I was like, like f5 and take intrigue me. So I was calculating f5, but after pawn takes, I just didn't like this. This looks like a position I would like playing as black, where they kind of like create some stuff. I didn't really want to deal with these hanging pawns in the center, especially with the g pawn being a dynamic pawn, right? Then the static h pawn would once become dynamic in the future, I feel like. I put a lot less thought into g takes f5, but apparently it was playable. The bishop can't take because of knight d6 check. So that was an easy one. And then after you take, I mean, they can't take the pawn. But, and you're doing a lot of pressure. But I just didn't, I don't know, I wasn't feeling it. I was feeling sticking with my plan, that is knight to e4. The idea of knight to e4 is they cannot take right away. So you stop them from taking because of the check and a fork. So at least it pauses everything. So we get knight takes, bishop takes, and again, they shouldn't really take because then bishop c1, they can't take this guy because, I mean, everything. I'd go bishop takes f4. And your position is opening up. At the cost of a pawn. They're pinned. They can't really move. So we get bishop takes e4. Rook takes. Now, after pawn takes, be careful. Do not take with the rook, because then you actually lose the pawn and you cannot pin their knight to their queen. So take with the queen. Take with the queen. Rook d to f8. Okay. F pawn was weak. He's trying to create a pawn extension, trying to fight for the center of the board, and rook f1. I was debating between a5 and rook f1 here. I chose the latter. Rook g8. Now I went a5. Okay, rook g6. This was an interesting move. He's hoping for f5. My pawn is pinned, so f5 en passant, and then something like rook takes and doubling up on the f file. That would give him a lot of counterplay, so good move. And here I misread, I misjudged the strength of f5. Still roughly balanced, but f5 would have been a strong move because after I retreat, takes queen a8, I'm fine. But the thing is, he's not forced to take. So he can kind of just build up, and I am dealt some pressure, and he pushed me back. But he went queen c6. He was a believer. I was hyped. Now, I knew that any endgame is going to benefit me because look at my pawns. Look at the pawn on a5 and e5. This knight alone is tying down his bishop and knight. This knight, favorite piece of the whole game. So, yeah, tying down his minor pieces. The f pawn is a big liability. The h pawn is an outside isolated pawn on a dark squared. I have a dark squared bishop. I can target that. And yeah, basically just because of the pawn structure, I knew an endgame would be, very easy to convert. Okay. Now, I made a decision. It's so odd in chess. You just always think move forward. Like, I know I moved fast and I was thinking move forward, but this is just such a dumb move. It's not bad. It's just so dumb. Like, obviously, you want to take with this rook so that your dark squares are open. So, yeah, basically, after rook takes, rook g7, I knew here I need to go rook back, bishop c1, open it up. So, really, here I was just like, thinking to myself, idiot, why would I have taken with that rook? That's all. That was the extent of my calculation here. And then I just, came to terms with it, moved back. He was doing something with his king. I was like, I don't know what he's doing. He was like, oh, I'm coming for the e5 pawn. And under time pressure, yeah, it was a 3-minute game. We both had I had like 50 some seconds or just over a minute, and he had like 30 some seconds, I'm pretty sure. So he blundered bishop h6, and I was so relieved. After bishop h6, I just turned my brain off. I was like, it's just winning. And it's super winning, because after he moves the rook and trades, he can't even save his pieces. He's forced to trade, and then he can't even save his bishop, because again, my pieces are very good. So he resigned. My garbage bishop, ironically, ended up winning the game. Study positional chess, backwards bishop moves are great. This knight was outposted. So yeah, I was happy with this game. I'm going to do more Chess in the Park videos in the future. I hate playing. I love playing in person. In person Blitz is so fun. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day.